Welcome to MLS Today. I am David Goss for our final episode of the year and, of course, our big preview of MLS Cup 2022 coming up tomorrow, Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox and Univision, the biggest game of the year. And I am so excited to dig into all of what's going to change this game, what matters, what we are looking forward to, and so much more. We're going to have Jordan Angeli on with us, as we have had almost every Friday this year. We're going to have Joe Lowery as well of the Backheel and Total Soccer Show. You know him very well. And one of our good friends, and Michael Lahoud, will be joining us to break down all things MLS Cup. Jordan, are you excited? Are you ready? We have arrived.
Yeah, I feel like you just started this whole thing, and now we are here. How many months later? 9 months later, and you made it through the whole season. Can everybody just give like a round of applause for David Goss?
Silently, please.
Yes. Well, they can do that little clapping thing here, right?
True. Yeah.
Incredible, and it's fun to be here. I think, especially with how everything turned out, because there's so much talk over the years about Supporter Shield versus MLS Cup, and with how tight the Shield race was this year, we're kind of getting the best of both worlds, right? You get the Supporter Shield, but then you also get the Supporter Shield contenders playing for the Cup, which it doesn't always work out that way. It rarely works out that way in playoff tournament. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I can't believe it. One more game and then we turn the page and go on to whatever's next.
World Cup, like a week away.
Yeah.
You know, we don't like to sit on our laurels too long. Joe, you are in with us as well. How are you feeling this fine Friday?
I'm feeling good. Goss used to holding up in LA yesterday, right?
Yes, we had a lot of guests. We did a live extra time with a bunch of different guests. Feel free to watch that one. I got mean mugged by Ryan Hollingshead while he sat an inch away from me, and I told him why I thought Philadelphia Union were the favorites and going to win in MLS Cup. So that was uncomfortable.
Brave.
So yeah, it's been a pretty good day for me.
Good, yeah. And it's also hard when you're staring down the barrel of his stash as well.
Yeah.
So there was a lot that you were going through in that
moment. Unfortunately, it's a bit, I'm just going to say it's a bit more cartoonish of a stash than intimidating of a stash. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have gotten through my pick. And there you go. I'm picking Philadelphia to win MLS Cup right off the bat. You're there. I've gotten you all there. Jordan, Joe, we're going to have Michael join us soon. But give me your early, let's start this off. What is it that you're thinking about most heading into this MLS Cup? Joe, we could start with you.
Yeah, Jordan kind of said it, right? It's the fact that we have two genuinely very good teams that not only did exceptionally well in the regular season, but also managed to navigate their way through a couple of playoff games and route to this game. Like it's been 19 years since we've had a top seed in one conference play a top seed in the other conference in MLS Cup. It just doesn't happen in large part because playoffs are made to sort of manufacture that variance. And that's part of what we love about playoffs, right? About how random they are. But it also does make it fun when it's been so long since we've had a best against best kind of matchup. It makes it fun, right? Earlier this week on the Total Soccer Show, we were talking about whether this was, on paper at least, the best MLS Cup matchup of all time. And I know Taylor had a heart for some of the earlier matchups, DC United fan that he is. But I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue that this matchup isn't like the primo matchup we've had in MLS Cup for a long time. Yeah. There is so much talent on both sides. Tom Bogert had this on his podcast, Managing Expectations, and he's also been tweeting a bit about it. You can see how different these teams are and how they built their squads as well. This is another thing for me. LAFC have been very smart about how they've done it. The Union have been very smart as well. They've taken different approaches, but they both exhausted like almost all of the possible resources that they have available to them in their markets. So that's another fun storyline here too.
That's so interesting too, how you can do something so drastically different and still find success in MLS, which is I love about this league. What Joe was talking about too, when I'm thinking about, okay, what is going to be exciting about this game? On either team, you could name a handful of game changers. It's easy to name the game changers. And I just really feel like this game tomorrow is going to go one of two ways. Well, it's going to be those big name players who show up, or it's going to be like this random person who scores a goal and they're going to be like, oh, you're the person that steps up in big moments. You're that guy. And so I'm excited because I kind of feel like it's going to be that. There's so much attention on these big name players for good reasoning. Like they've proven that they can be successful at all different types of levels. But I do feel like when you're in these types of games, it's that person who shows up, who might not score all the goals, but ends up being at the right time in the right moment late in a game to just tap something in. So I don't know. I think that's what I'm most excited about is who is going to be the person to step up in a really big game with two teams who have faced each other and put on a show the last couple of times they faced each other. So yeah, this is gonna be fun, and it seems like it already has been, Goss, in LA. It's gonna be a spectacle, huh?
Well, and what's great about it is we don't have to build it up
Yeah.
because of all the things you guys talked about, which is it's the two best teams. It's LA. LAFC is a show. Bank of California is a show. We talked on ETR yesterday about the ticket prices that they're seeing secondary market.
Oh my
The
gosh.
range is between $330 and $15,000. So, like, you don't have to promote something that's already promoting itself. Let me
Yeah.
give some of the background to what you guys said. So, one, Philadelphia has statistically the second best defense in Major League Soccer history, second best goal differential in MLS history. This is the first time two teams meeting in MLS Cup are both over 60 points on the season, and both of them finished on 67. Now, MLS has changed a lot, the amount of teams, the amount of games, ties, kick shootouts, all that stuff. But still, that's where we stand right now. It's also the fourth time ever that we've had two teams in MLS Cup for the first time in their club's history playing against each other. That includes year one when everyone was new. So that was
Oh wow.
guaranteed. So we've had it in 2008 with Columbus and Red Bulls. We had it in 2016 with TFC and Seattle, and now here. So Jordan, to your point of like, someone's going to be a hero and someone's going to be an all-time hero, and it could be someone random. I think that holds very true in this game. I also feel when you look back at 2016 Toronto Seattle, like this has the potential to be two teams that we talk about a lot over the next 5-6 years. And this is sort of the first time where they're going to be linked, right? When you bring up Toronto and you talk MLS anything, Seattle gets mentioned all the time. And the same the other way around. It feels like these two teams are sort of the next era of that. And this is that first big moment for them to be on the stage together.
Absolutely. And I think that we're all with all these expectations. I don't know about you guys, but I'm expecting like a 3-2 affair, like something wild down to the last 10 minutes, a goal gets scored. There's a lot of expectation on this game because of how high powered these offenses have been, how successful these teams have been throughout the entire season. Even with LAFC having a little dip there towards the end of their season, they were tinkering with some things and still found a way to find what was right for them going into the playoffs. There's a lot of expectation on this game, so
Yeah.
I hope it lives up to it.
Yeah, and even Gus, to go back to what you're talking about these two teams being mentioned together, I think it's a good point. It's going to be fascinating, I think, to see how this. I don't want to call it a rivalry because I don't really think it is one, but almost like a front office rivalry kind of continues to develop, because I think that's part of why these teams are here, right? And I kind of mentioned it already. It's about how deep their rosters are, right? Philly have tapped in far more to the academy, at least in terms of bringing those players to the first team, than LAFC have so far. But you have these two soccer officers in Ernst Tanner and John Thornton. There were some barbs traded earlier this season, but they both done a great job of building these teams to get or to help get their players to this moment. I don't see many signs that that's going to change anytime soon. And obviously, MLS is, in a lot of respects, highly unpredictable, as we who make those predictions on MLSsoccer.com find out firsthand when we get tweeted at every year. I mean, it's unpredictable, right? But I do think these teams have done an excellent job of building that foundation, of developing the kinds of talents, Jordan, to your point, that can make games 2-2, which is what we saw back in May, or 3-3, which is what we saw before the world shut down, or 3-2, if that really is your prediction, which I would absolutely love to see. I mean, these are talented teams, and I think the way that the organizations have enabled those key decision makers to keep making good decisions, and how smart Thornton and Tanner do seem to be, and the managers being able to implement a lot of their vision in some respects. Yeah, I do kind of hope that this is sort of the next generation, while Toronto is trying to find themselves, while Atlanta has completely fallen off in the Eastern Conference. In the West, while you have still not really a lot of established success now that Seattle sort of has dropped down, and the Galaxy are still trying to find themselves. I mean, there's other teams there that I didn't name, so I'm not trying to take shots. But yeah, I do think these teams are very well positioned to have more and more success over the next few years.
It is right now 1-0 Ernst Tanner, because John Thornton came on this show earlier this week, and Ernst was able to dodge us. So congrats to Ernst Tanner for avoiding my heavy hitting questions. Thank you to LAFC and John Thornton. If you want to go listen to that interview, just search MLS Today on Spotify, any of your podcast apps. We had John Thornton on Wednesday. We talked about the conversation around Gareth Bale with Ernst Tanner, but we talked about building this team and so much more. Joe, let's take it out of the front office onto the field. These are also two teams that have distinct styles. They know how they want to play soccer. What are you seeing as that matches up against each other on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a great question, Goss, because the more and more that I think about these teams, they are different. Yes, absolutely, they're different. I'll get to that in a second. But they're also similar in a lot of ways, right? The shapes are different, so we can start there. The Union love their 4-4-2 diamond. We kind of know that at this point. That's been their thing, really, ever since Ernst Tanner has come in large part, because Jim Curtin didn't used to really play this way, but now he plays this sort of against the ball, aggressive transition kind of style out of that 4-4-2 diamond. LAFC play a 4-3-3, which is traditionally a shape that we associate with like more control of the game, and they want to have the ball a little bit more, which is true. I'm not convinced though that Steve Cherundolo really like loves possession in the same way that maybe Josh Wolf does, or the same way that Wilfred Nancy does, or even someone like Caleb Porter, Jordan. I think in some ways Steve Cherundolo wants to play against the ball too. And being at home, I'm not sure he's going to have that luxury. But in diving into some of the numbers and watching some tape back earlier this week, these two teams are two of the best in the league at forcing turnovers. I believe LAFC is 5th and the Union are 6th. Maybe it's the other way around. And then when you go off of those turnovers, they're the two best teams in the league at creating chances, right? Their XG after winning the ball in transition and going is first for LAFC and second for the Union in the league. They thrive in transition. Both of these teams do. That's the area that I'm really curious to see how it's going to play out, right? Are LAFC going to even have moments to attack in transition? Are the Union going to force them to possess and basically then kind of get the game going their way as the away team? I don't know what that's going to look like. But figuring out where the ball is turned over, which team does a better job of managing those turnovers to deny the other team a chance to just run in space, that I think is going to be a fascinating matchup tomorrow.
Yeah, and that both teams, that's such, I love that you put the numbers to that, Joe, because you can see that so clearly in the way both of these teams play, like wanting to force a turnover. And I think LAFC really showed that in their game plan in this last game against Austin. Like, we will make you give us the ball back, and then we're going to get after you. I don't know if they're going to have as many chances to do that, but I think both of these teams do a really good job when they win the ball back. Is I feel like, yes, they use the width, they use the center of the field as well, but I really feel like both of these teams in transition are so good, whether it's Carlos Vela coming inside, or for LAFC, or Kellen Acosta or Cifuentes getting into those. They're not really the outside channels, they're like the half space channels, but it's really in the attack. And when they transition, that's where both of these teams like to go, because of the two players I just mentioned for LAFC, but also if you flip it to Philadelphia, that's where those, players that sit in their shuttlers sit a little bit deeper when they're in defense, but then it gives them space to go straight at the defense with two players in front of them, in Ua and Carranza, that if they attack that space, it asks questions of a holding midfielder, of an outside back, to come into that space. And they're really good in transition. So I think that is such a good numbers to some of the tactics that these teams both like to play, because you can visually see it, but that really supports what they try to do as well.
And Joe, I think it's interesting you mentioned the success they both have attacking transition. I then am thinking on the flip side, okay, well then who can defend it better?
Yeah.
And it feels to me like this Philly team is set up for that. I think the center back, I don't know if Chiellini starts or not, and that's something we can talk about. I think the center backs are more athletic for Philadelphia. I think Jose Martinez compared to Ilie Sanchez or Kellen Acosta even, right? That's an eraser in that way that's different. Now Philly will want to push those fullbacks high, but it feels like to me that's where Philly is different than everyone LAFC has played, which is they can sort of hang against what LAFC does at their best. And there are a few teams in MLS that LAFC have faced that are capable of doing that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I do think that area of the field that you just mentioned, the 6, the center backs, and I'll even drop that back to Andre Blake as well, who I think could be the difference maker in this game. We forget about goalkeepers all the time. And I know you two, Jordan and Gus, have talked about Andre Blake plenty in the past, but it's easy for me to sort of forget about the people between the sticks in games like this because they're not going to see the ball as much. But Andre Blake, was like a top 2 goalkeeper in the league this year, clearly, and won goalkeeper of the year pretty deservedly. So he's going to be key as well. But that's the area of the field where I think the Union have the biggest advantage. Now, it's also the area of the field where you flip it to the attacking side for LAFC, where they probably have the biggest advantage. I think that's the section of the pitch where there's the most quality, right? The Union center backs, number 6 and goalkeeper against LAFC's attacking line and maybe a number 8 making a run out of midfield or whatever that looks like. Soccer is fluid, and so we're not really going to see like 1v1 matchups in those areas. But yeah, I think the Union do have all of the tools to be solid in transition for the most part, for as good as LAFC are. But to go back, I mean, LAFC dominated possession, or at least controlled the majority of possession back in May when these two teams played at Bank of California Stadium. I would be pretty surprised if they don't control most of the possession in this game tomorrow. So I do think another advantage that the Union have, and I think my prediction still goes LAFC's way, but I don't know. We can talk about that later if you want, David. I think the advantage that the Union have is that they can afford to just be compact, right? They can afford to sit a little bit deeper and force LAFC to break them down. Jose Martinez can snuff things out. The center backs can just step in to intercept or step in to head the ball away on a cross. They don't have to really extend themselves unless they want to. I think in some ways that's kind of the luxury of being the away team and having the atmosphere largely be against you, is that you can just sit there and suffer and sit around and just wait for things to happen. Jordan, did you ever experience that? Right? I feel like Bobby talks about this, like defending Bobby Warshaw, just defending and sort of suffering and just you're in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, is that a mentality you would have coming into games, whether it's a big game or just even a smaller regular season game or whatever that looks like, of just being there and defending and mucking things up and sitting around?
For sure. And I think that one of the things that Philadelphia, if that is the route that they choose to go, it would benefit them, because you have to be able to control the tempo at which this game is played. And I think that if they say, all right, we're going to defend and we're going to frustrate this LAFC team and not let them get into the spaces that they like to create. And when they get in there, we are just hounding them with numbers and getting at them with front pressure and back pressure and double teaming. The frustration that you sense if you're the opponent in those types of moments, I think can really be deflating. And it could deflate the atmosphere of this LAFC crowd, who is very loud. I don't know if they're deflatable, to be quite honest. But if you see the team have a lot of the ball, but they're not getting chances, that might take a little bit out of them. Or they could go the opposite. So, but it could take a little bit out of this team, out of this place, and make, I don't know how many Philly fans are going, but I would imagine there's going to be a good amount who are going to try to be loud in those moments and counteract what the 32-52 are doing. But this Philly team, I think that's a good mentality, especially with how gritty they are. I saw a lot more of Philly this year, the last couple of years, than I have LAFC. Not to say that I haven't seen LAFC play, but when I'm watching Philadelphia and the way that they defend, they are hard to find spaces in the channel and to get a good cross off. Even if you're coming through the half space through combinations in that outside of the box, they don't give you much. They protect the space in behind them, so you can't really go in behind the back line, because Glesnes and Elliott track back really well and don't give you that space. I think they do a really good job in transition of getting back into their block quickly. So then even if you think you have a break, you really don't, because they get their numbers back. So kind of what you're saying, that triangle centrally of the two center backs and Martinez do a really good job of managing, okay, where is the space? How can we keep everything in front of us? And I think if Philadelphia keeps things in front of them, they have a good structure to clog up the spaces that LAFC want to attack and just frustrate them a little bit, which will probably be at the beginning of this game a big part of what they're trying to do.
Now, one of the things that sticks out to me about that is they are so much better at defending when Alejandro Bedoya is in the team, because he and Flock on the side of the diamond, they're able to either cover in the channels if the fullbacks go wide, or cover out wide like we've seen Flock do, I think, over the course of the playoffs. A lot of that's been against the back five, but Hollingshead and Palacios are going to get forward. They're going to be options. Cifuentes is sort of active and around that front line wherever you want to be. How big of a loss is Bedoya if he can't go? And how much does that worry you for Philadelphia coming into this game, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern. And I don't know. It's hard for me, as someone who never played professional soccer, to read too much into the intangible aspect of this, but you have to imagine, right, from everything that I've heard and read about Alejandro Bedoya, like, he is this Philadelphia Union team. in so many ways. Like you read and you listen to what Jim Curtin says about him, and I can imagine not having him in the lineup from minute one of this game is going to be a blow. Not that the Union can't recover from it because they're talented and deep enough to do that. Jack McGlynn brings a whole different set of abilities and skills to the table than Bedoya does that could actually serve the Union really well in this game if things go a certain way. So it's not like, oh, it's over if Bedoya isn't in the starting 11 or can't see the field. But yeah, it hurts, right? It hurts on the intangible aspects of this game. It also hurts on the field, I think, in certain ways. If we're talking about them defending and suffering for stretches. Yeah, I mean, I'm picking Bedoya to cover ground over McGlynn every day of the week, right? Now, I mean, I do think some of the limitations are minimized if the Union are sitting a little deeper, like we've been talking about, because, they're not running as much all the time, but they're still going to step up and press, right? They're still going to try to extend and make life difficult for LAFC and capitalize on turnovers higher up the field. So, yeah, Bedoya is a big loss in those defensive phases. And even you look at what he does in the attack, he's not like a super flashy passer, right? He's not going to really wow you with line breaking pass after line breaking pass, but he connects and he gets both himself and the ball into good spots in the attacking third and into the box. He provides value with his passing and with his receiving. You go through and look at some of the stats and just watch the tape as well. He's not a Jack McGlynn level sauce guy because McGlynn is like so special in that way. He's so special. Bedoya is not really special, but in that same way. But he does so many maybe more subtle things that add value that, yeah, if he can't go, it's going to be a miss for the Union in a few different ways.
And for all of those things that you just said, Joe, that is why Bedoya is special, because he does all the small things so well and intricate for this team. But I just do want to point out, like, we should not underestimate these young kids. I've seen it firsthand in MLS Cup coming in and making a bigger name for themselves. So in the benefit for McGlynn is he's had this year where he should feel like he should be confident going into this game and performing however Jim Curtin asked him to perform. Whatever the game plan is, he knows that he's now sitting on a buttload of experience from a season where he has grown so much as a player and had the opportunity to go in to make mistakes and to recover from those mistakes, that he can go into this game and feel confident if he's starting, if he's coming off the bench, whatever his role may be. I do think that, to some of those points Joe said, he is a special player and he could be asked to use that tidy left foot of his to create. And if he is called upon, there's no doubt in my mind that he's not going to step up and perform.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be special for him. Obviously, he was forced into the Eastern Conference Finals last year, so he's been in weird moments like this, and he performed at a pretty high level, but a lot of that's been at home for him. Like, it feels like every time Jack McGlynn has had a star moment, it's been at Subaru Park, so now it's on the road. Jordan, let's look at LAFC. The only question marks really are who is Gareth Bale, which is its own conversation. And then the center backs, I think. Chiellini starts the last game, comes out at halftime. Ibiaga comes in. Segura not healthy. How much of a worry is that position to you? And sort of what do you think about when you think of the aspects Chiellini can bring, Ibiaga can bring, what they miss with Segura, and sort of what this looks like for this team against Philly, who play with the two strikers out there. And I pushed Jim Curtin on it yesterday. Corey Burke's not starting this game, so I've been trying to push that all week. It's not going to happen, so we can talk Michael Lahoud and Julian Carrasco.
But why would you want Burke to start? Because you can just come in and just bulldoze people at the end.
I know, but listen, it feels like 2 games now that Ura's, whether he's not confident or not healthy, I think it's probably that weird combination of the second where he's not himself, and so he's not taking the risks he was physically because he clearly isn't there. And it's like, okay, at home against NYC, you could last 60 minutes and only be down 1-0.
Yeah.
What's that look like at the Bank of California Stadium? If you're not your best team for the first 45 minutes, are you still in this game?
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
That's something to consider.
And it's just such a vulnerable position, a center forward, when it comes to confidence and how much that lingers on, if you are on that brink of like, man, I haven't been scoring, or I haven't been fully healthy and I haven't been able to contribute. Sometimes then you press the game a little too much and you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do that don't feel like you're feeling the game out, but you're pressing the game. And I think we see a little bit of that in UA right now. I think when you're talking about these center backs, the number of center backs that you just mentioned for LAFC, yeah, Segura is is difficult. I think everybody was just excited to have him back and to see him perform how he was performing. And it's difficult to have such a good combination and the steadiness that LAFC was seeing with him, and then to have to shuffle that late in the season. But at the same time, they had the depth to do that. Not many teams would have the depth with Ibiaga and Chiellini to be able to do that. I think I go two ways in this, because I don't know the tactical reason, quote unquote, that Chiellini came out of the last game, right? And but I do know that they weren't really allowing him to be able to do what he does best, which is to be able to be a connector from the center back. So they were forcing everything to Murillo. And so is that the same kind of tactics Philadelphia are going to use if Chiellini is in the game? And then is he not going to be helpful for them going forward? But it would be hard for me to pass up the knowledge that he has defending the top players in the world with defending a two front, because there's so much organization that goes into it, so much communication, where he might lack a step or two on Ibiaga, he is going to be able to read the game faster and potentially be in a better starting position to not allow Ua to get the ball, not allow Carranza to get the ball. There's something to be said about those types of X factors: his communication, his positioning, his ability to organize not only his back line, but those three center midfielders in front of him. Is that enough to start him over the speed of Ibiaga, even though Ibiaga is not going to give you as many of those extra factors that he will? I don't know what they're going to do. But it felt like when they signed him, this is why they signed him. So are they going to give him a chance to be who they wanted him to be? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, that's where I come down on this, Jordan, is when Chiellini was signed, we were all talking about this as okay, he might not play 90 minutes every game in the regular season because he doesn't have to, frankly, for LAFC, and he's old, right? You add those two things together. and then you come into a game like this, though. This is the stuff. Like, this is the reason why, or at least as we all were talking about it, that you want to have someone like Chiellini, you want to have someone like Gareth Bale. And now both of them might not start in this game. Like that just feels strange to me. I understand it a little bit more with Bale. Chiellini, I feel like, unless there's something we don't know, which it seems like there certainly is involved here, he's got to play. Like, I think he has to start in this game. Ibiaga is not someone that I would feel exceptionally comfortable starting in a game like this. I think he is a good fourth center back on most teams' rosters. I don't think he is someone you want starting MLS Cup, frankly. He's mobile, but not like game-changing kind of mobile. And I don't know that I trust some of his work with the ball. So, I think if Chiellini's ready to go, like, you start him, you understand there are risks with that, as there are with any 38-year-old center back in the world. Like, there are issues there, but you trust the players around him, and you trust Chiellini himself to make the right reads defensively, to time it correctly, to time his movements, and then to help you control the game. Because like I said earlier, I think LAFC are going to have to control this game, at least for stretches, and Chiellini is the best player in MLS at helping you do that stuff.
It's going to be fascinating. One of the other names we talk about too much, we don't talk about enough, Dennis Bouanga. Like, we talk about Bale and Chiellini and how they've changed this team. Jordan, how has he changed LAFC? What has he brought?
LAFC for so many years, and they had this at moments, right, when they had someone to balance Carlos Vela. But when all the attention goes to Vela, minus that 1 year where it didn't matter and he scored all the goals in the world,
and had all the assists.
Yeah. I think it adds a true threat on the opposing side to Vela. So you can't really tilt the field. You can't really just say, oh, we'll just push it to the left side, because Bouanga gets on the ball. And it's not just, I remember talking last week when we were previewing the games. I think it was before the actual semifinals. And I said, Bouanga's going to be a part of the reason LAFC wins. Like, he's going to score the goal, he's going to assist the goal. And he didn't do either, but he got the corner kick that led to the first goal because of his running off the ball, because he is a threat without the ball with his pace and timing his run to get in behind. But he's also a threat with the ball at his feet, and whether it's on the dribble or quick combinations through the really dangerous area of that attacking third. He is a special player. And I feel like once he found a goal, he was like, I got this.
This is easy.
Yeah, this is easy. And I think that it's not just him, right? It's how the team understands that he wants the ball. If he's not getting at least the opportunity to threaten in behind, like if they don't play him some of those balls that we saw against Austin where he's cutting through the center backs and he actually gets the ball, it didn't lead to much, right? But now the back line has to respect that. So what does it do? It creates more room in front for Fuentes to operate, for even Bouanga at times to threaten the back run and then to come get the ball into space. So I think his movement off the ball creates space not only for himself but for the players around him, and it adds a different level of balance to this LAFC team that they didn't have with Rodriguez, and they didn't have for a while, and they were trying to manufacture it and just never really panned out. And I think he has been such an excellent signing, and maybe a benefit to him. He didn't have all the hype behind him, right? He wasn't Gareth Bale or Chiellini, and so everybody wasn't talking about him, and he's like, haha, look at me, look at what I can do.
And he's the big money DP. And that's what was interesting talking to John Thorrington, where it's like, I kept bringing up Bale and Chiellini, and he kept bringing up Bouanga, of like, that's the big thing that our ownership gave us and brought us in this offseason. And Jordan's talking about that balance. Like, I think he's the combination of Rodriguez and Diego Rossi. Rossi was a finisher. Rodriguez is a dribbler. But they didn't have complete games. And now you have Bouanga in there who can do both alongside what Carlos Vela brings.
Yeah, I'll jump in on Bouanga, who I think has been brilliant this year. You go back through and look at the summer signings, and it's Bouanga and Ricky Puig who stand out kind of above everybody else. Although I do want to shout out, I think Sporting Kansas City did some great business in the offseason as well. In the summer as well with Agata and Tommy. But I mean, Bouanga is like this next level MLS player. At least he looks that way. He was a good Ligue 1 player, and we've seen this before with players coming over from Europe and from those particular leagues. You know, you get to MLS after being a good Ligue 1 player, the odds are pretty good that you're going to be a really good MLS player. And Bouanga has been that so far. It took a while for the goals to match like all the good stuff he was doing on the field, but that's kind of how soccer works sometimes. And now he is, guys, I like the way you put it. I still want to watch more film of this guy because he hasn't played a ton still in Major League Soccer. But like, I do think he has aspects of Diego Rossi's game of being a bit of a vertical presence. He's not as fast as Rossi was in my mind, at least not in MLS, but he does like to get in behind, and we've seen that on some of his goals. He'll time his runs very well and wait to exploit the seam. Maybe he's not burning you down in transition like Rossi would, but he can get in behind. And then he also does have the technical ability to beat you in tight spaces. So yeah, he's not quite Rossi, he's not quite Rodriguez. He's his own player, but I do think, Jordan, to go back to what you said, he complements Carlos Vela very well. He adds another real threat on the left side for LAFC, and it looks like he's going to produce to match all the good stuff he's been doing. He's scary, and how the Union deal with LAFC's attacking front is going to have a massive impact on this game.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch how Jim Curtin tries to deal with this in this Philly backline. We've got another guest in here, a super sub, our LAFC style super sub here, and Michael Lahoud joining us. The Lahoud mood over here. Michael, how you doing this morning?
They save the best for last. So
I'll tap out then.
No, it's good to be back. Been traveling a lot. Traveled during the first couple rounds of the playoffs, but you know, something called MLS Cup is around the corner, so I figured we'd come back home for that. Exciting matchup between these two teams, but glad to be back on the show.
All right, Michael, you're gonna have to start us then on predictions.
Oh man,
what are your picks? Why? And then everyone else can tear you apart from that.
Okay, I see why you brought me on the show. Nah, I tell you what, you asked what the Lahoud mood is, and I'm just going to go right for the jugular. The Lahoud mood is a melody. It's a vibe, and it goes like this. Do, 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 do. Philadelphia Union fans, you will be thanking me at the final whistle. I have respect, first of all, for both of these teams. First, Philadelphia Union, I played for them. Jim, I've known him for years, former teammate of mine, former coach of mine. What he's done to build that Union team over the last couple of years, I go back to 2016, 2017, where I looked at that roster and the influx of young talent. I looked at that roster and thought, this is finally Jim's team that represents Jim's identity. And the fact that they're one of the few teams in Major League Soccer that play a 4-4-2. It's a diamond formation, but they play with two strikers. In Major League Soccer, I still think the league is at a place where a lot of defenders and center backs do not like to defend 1v1. They're used to defending one striker, and Philadelphia they have the ability to wear you down. And those two strikers up top, whether it's Corey Burke, if he gets the nod, Michael Ure, Carranza, they are a handful because they can run in the channels. They can really push the envelope on your line, testing your back line, which creates space underneath for the likes of Gazdag to run rampant. Gazdag is a baller, and he's a goal-scoring, attacking midfielder. And I think for those reasons, that matchup between Gazdag and Ilie Sanchez will be one to keep an eye on from a Union perspective. But you cannot count out LAFC high-powered offense. And I love the conversation before about LAFC's potent offense. That front three, good God, I'm really happy I retired, so I didn't have to play against that front three, because they are so dynamic. They bring different challenges. But I go back to the prediction hour, mouthful to get to this prediction. I pick the Union. Why? Because they've gone to Bank of California Stadium and have gotten results. They've scored a bunch of goals there. And Jim Curtin and this team, a lot of these players have been part of those teams that have gotten results at the Bank. So the fear factor of going to the Bank will not be there for the Union. They will like their chances going up against a team they've been successful in the past.
I love all of that, Michael Lahoud, coming in with that energy. Okay, Jordan, on to you.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where are you going?
Gosh, Michael came in with like a rhythmic melody.
Yeah, right.
It was needed.
I'll probably go this and
Wow.
32-52. I think LAFC takes this one. I really do. And you know, I feel a little bit like we got here and we didn't even talk about Gazdag, which then Michael comes in and he brings it up. Gazdag, his ability from last year to this year, and I think it all has to go with knowing the system, getting front runners in front of him who are goal dangerous, suit him, who stay inside the goal and are a threat, so he can have a little bit more space with when they occupy a center back. He's been so good, and I do think that is my matchup, Michael, of this game is Gazdag on Ilie, and how that works out for both teams, I think is going to be a really big telling point. But I just feel like LAFC at home, I think that they're going to be able to pull out those shuttlers for Philadelphia in the midfield and create some space right next to Martinez and get him working, get him shifting from side to side as that lone six. And he's gonna put in a shift. And if they can do that, if they can use their possession to really make him work, I feel like there's going to be goals in this game for LAFC. And I just don't know if I can root against them at home with the noise that place, how loud that place is going to be. It just seems to me that it feels like it's their year. So this is going to be the most fun game, and it could go either way, like for a number of reasons, but I got to go with LAFC.
I completely agree with you in terms of how close this is. And every time I think, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sort of lean on this. Someone pushes back. And so, like, you know, I talked with Ryan Hongstead yesterday. I was like, how do you deal with Kai Wagner? And he's like, well, he has to deal with Carlos Vela. And you're like, oh, man, how does Kai Wagner deal with Carlos Vela? Like, that's now the number one element of this game. And that's sort of what's great about this, right? It's strength on strength. And how do you deal with the other team's strength? And sort of what Joe started us with about the transition game. And I just think Philadelphia deals with LAFC's strengths better than LAFC deals with Philly's strengths. LAFC might be a stronger team overall, but I lean on Philly defensively being comfortable in moments when LAFC's at their best, whether it's when they're defending deep and packed in and dealing with guys, you know, making that second run when Arango rolls out of the middle and Cifuentes pops in and Vela comes off the edge and Buanga. I think Philly deals with handing those players off well, and everyone in the back 6 or 7 for Philly can defend in those moments. I lean on Andre Blake and saying last week I said Montreal could have beaten NYC if they had Andre Blake in goal 2 weeks ago, right? Because they could have had someone make a special goal, and then Blake did it last week. And so that, even with how good Brad Stuver played, that's now an element that Philly has that LAFC hasn't had to face off against. And I just love the idea of the direct attack with these two center forwards against LAFC's back line, and then Gazdag coming in behind. Of just, is Ilie tracking Gazdag across the field? Like, look at the goal against NYC that Gazdag scores, where it's the ball out to the left to Carranza, who heads it down. Is Ilie and Kellen tracking Gazdag to that second post? Is Chiellini getting pulled in? Like, there's and LAFC has all these threats as well going the other way, but it just feels like there's so much there for Philly that's different than what LAFC's had to deal with. And I think Philly can manage LAFC's best at their moments to stay alive in the game when they're not as good.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a point that I think both teams have been the beneficiaries of. So much is made about their starting lineups, the consistency they've shown. LAFC's front three, between that combination between Bouanga, Vela, and Arango, I mean, those three have caught form at the perfect time. That's why they're the Supporter Shield winners. That's why the MLS Cup is in LA. The movement with that front three is something to behold. Chicho Arango, his ability to peel out, run in the channels, and Bouanga, who he's playing as a left winger, but he's also functioning in Ligue 1 as a center forward, is now right number 9. That balance, they keep you guessing, where when one player makes a movement in the channel, the other one is occupying that central position. If they can get that going early on and often, that has the capacity to unbalance Elliott in particular. McGlynn is a midfielder. I do remember that from my travels. So that would be wrong if I said that. But I look at that. And on the other side, though, one thing to behold is subs.
Yeah.
Subs have come in and changed games. Opoku, a guy who, when LAFC played Austin FC in that 4-1 demolition derby that Austin FC fans will remember for a long time, and LAFC fans and LAFC players definitely remembered, because they showed up at the bench like a team who was sore and felt salty about that, and it showed on the scoreboard. One thing that I was scratching my head is, why isn't Opoku playing? Because he's been one of their best players, unsung heroes of this team. He has been an impact sub off the bench. And you look at Corey Burke and McGlynn for Philadelphia, they have come in and changed the game in the playoffs, in both of their playoff games.
Yeah.
Whichever team can get the most out of their subs, because their front lines will tire each other out. I think they'll go blow for blow. Philly has more of an ability to absorb pressure on the road. They've gotten more points on the road than a lot of teams do in Major League Soccer. They're okay with sitting back because they can bypass LAFC's press and go long. If Opoku makes more of an impact on this game, LAFC will win.
Yeah.
If Corey Burke and McGlynn come in, then Philadelphia have a bigger chance to win. I think it's going to come down to that.
This is just so funny because we just both did what Goss was saying, where we both like gave our prediction, but then also like gave the reason why the other team was going to win too.
Yeah. To follow up on that, Michael, LAFC 15 goals from substitutes this year, second most in MLS history, most since 1998. Like, that's how dangerous this bench is. And some of that is because they're so deep that Arango's been coming off the bench at times, and Bouanga started coming off the bench, and whatever that is. We haven't really talked about Arango. We haven't really talked about Mahalo. Like, that's how good these sides are, and that's how much they have with them. Joe, what's going on in your brain?
Okay, so I'll talk more about LAFC because Michael came in with a melody. Jordan came in with a little chant. I'm going to come in with a haiku. Right, that I've crafted.
Wow.
Andrew Weeby's jumping out of the
Weeby,
window.
get in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Weeby can come in and do a better one, I'm sure. But here's what I got on the fly. LAFC will defend their home at the bank. It's time for the cup. That's my haiku for LAFC.
Man.
I think home field advantage is another factor here. And I think there is not a ton between these two teams. And given the fact that LAFC are playing at home in this moment, they have players who have been in these kinds of moments before. The Union do as well, right? They've had players that have been on playoff runs and have won trophies. But I can't shake this idea that LAFC are a little bit deeper, that LAFC are a little more talented on the field with top-end, game-changing kind of guys. Philly have those players, don't get me wrong. But I think LAFC might have 2 or 3 for every one that the Union have. The one, and I'll do the same thing that Michael and Jordan both done. The one thing that scares me, the one thing that really does scare me is that group of Union players that we talked about earlier. It's, if I'm LAFC, that's what scares me. It's the number 6, the center backs, and most importantly, Andre Blake. Like, you can shoot on goal all you want, and NYCFC did some of this. But Andre Blake has been consistently just an elite shot stopper in MLS over the last 3 seasons. He's the kind of guy that changes this game for the Union. LAFC can pepper shots on goal, but Andre Blake is going to erase, or at least based on his past, is going to erase a lot of that stuff. So I do think LAFC with Arango, with Bouanga, with Vela, with Cifuentes, who I think is going to be one of the biggest winners at the World Cup for Ecuador because he's just that good and people are going to know it. I think people already do in certain leagues around the world, but everybody's going to know it. I think later this month and into December, if Ecuador make any sort of run, I just feel like LAFC have enough, and you add that to the home field advantage. I think they should be able to get this done.
So if Philly wins, you think Blake is MVP?
I think so. I really
Yeah.
do. I think LAFC will have enough control of this game. They will generate enough shots, if not like super high quality shots. They're going to be trying to test Andre Blake. And I think if the Union withstand this one, it's either going to be someone like Gazdag, who scores a goal in transition as he's done a lot this year, or Blake for being that sort of defensive anchor that they need in this match.
One player that I want to highlight when you talk about Philly and LAFC matchup, Glesnes. Remember that goal he scored? Just the,
Yeah,
from yeah, the one. I mean, it almost broke my TV screen when I saw it. He scored. He looked like he shot the ball from Long Beach Airport. I know that's a far distance because my family's out in Los Angeles, so I know, Mom, Dad, you're listening. I know. Rooting for the Union in this one. I know there's going to be a dinner conversation about that when I get home in the off season. But he's a guy that stepped up. One of the unsung heroes. He's a guy that stepped up offensively, so good with the ball. It has that confidence in that swagger about him to step into midfield and continue running forward. And you need a bit of that arrogance this time of year. But I love the fact that we're talking about Andre Blake, because let's go back the last couple of seasons. The teams that have won MLS Cups in general, the last couple of seasons have had goalkeepers that performed in the finals, have had goalkeepers that have been a big storyline. NYCFC going up against a Portland Timbers team that seemed to have destiny written all over it, hosting MLS Cup unexpectedly because everyone else lost and they had the medal to continue it. Portland seemed like it was written in the stars, but it was quality goalkeeping that was their undoing in MLS Cup. And I just wonder if that difference between the posts in the goalkeeping position will be our biggest talking point at the final whistle. That's why I like the Philadelphia Union. It's just they have a slighter edge in goalkeeping because for as much offensive prowess as LAFC has, if they don't get that early goal, which Bank of California Stadium, when LAFC go up a goal early, you're done. It's just put one in the L column. If they get that early goal, then momentum, black and goal. If Philadelphia frustrate them and it's 0-0, the longer this game goes 0-0, Andre Blake grows in confidence, the back line grows in confidence, LAFC becomes frustrated. All it takes is one shot. I was about to sing Eminem again. One shot, one opportunity. I won't go there. But all it takes is for one bad bounce, because something I've seen from LAFC throughout the season is the center back position. Chiellini has brought in more stability in that back line, but Murillo does have a mistake in him. He is prone to falling asleep at the wrong second, and LAFC has been bailed out because they have a good front line time and time again. But LAFC do have that mistake-prone kind of deficiency at times late in games in the second half. So I just wonder if goalkeeping is going to be the difference between both teams.
I think we could talk about this game for 90 to 120 minutes
Forever.
and still not be able to decide it. And yet we're going to find out tomorrow. This is special. This is going to be a lot of fun. And thank you to you three for joining me. So Jordan, on the record, LAFC 1,000%. If they lose, she'll be devastated. Joe as well. Michael Lahoud on the other side with me. We are all Philly in this one. We're basically Kellen Acosta, right? We're all diehard Philly people. MLS Cup. It's always an interesting week. Joe, Michael, Jordan, thank you all for joining me here on this one. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Goss.
Yeah. No, thanks for tapping me in late, sub, all the way from France back to the States.
You're a Poku or our
I'll take that. I
or
love
our
a
Burke,
Poku.
right?
I'll take that.
We gotta go.
I'll take that.
We gotta go one of each.
I appreciate it so much to all of you. Okay, so 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow on Fox, on Univision. That is MLS Cup for 2022, our final game of the season, which also means this is our final show for MLS Today of the year. Over 165 episodes of this show. It has been an incredible experience to bring this to you all year. And a lot of thank yous out there. Thank you to Susanna Collins, of course, my co-host on Mondays and Thursdays. Thank you to all our regular guests, Jordan Angeli, who joins us every Friday, Jaime Macias, who's been with us a ton, Kelly Giannone, who started us off with a bang, breaking Vela news in the first episode and being one of the best that we have on here, Michael Lahoud, yourself, Joe Lowery, Felipe Cardenas, Sam Stachel, Tom Bogert, who's helped co-host with me a lot throughout the year, to everyone who's answered a panic text or DM over the course of this season from me saying, can you come on and now? Because we need someone to join the show. And of course, the local beat reporters who we cannot cover this league without you. And they are the reason that there is quality coverage of this league. Michael Singh in Toronto, Ashley Mahoney, Victor Ariza, Chris Bills, everyone at the striker, Katie Goodman, Laurel Failer, Roberto Abramovich, Amy Walsh, and I'm literally missing 1,000 people in that because we've had over 165 shows and so many great guests. Please go out and follow the people who cover your team or cover the other teams around this league. Help build their platform because they're the reason that we can do everything that we do. Big thank you to Rich Kaufman for filling in when Galena is out. Big thank you to Rich Hernandez for helping lead things from the top. And the brainchild this is of Abner Seves. Thank you to him for putting this all together. Thank you to all of you for joining us every single day. And thank you most of all to Galena, who keeps me and my insanity on track sometimes and allows me to overflow at other times. It's been awesome being a part of this with you every single day. And maybe in the off season, we'll just do 10:30 a.m. meetings just to hang out and talk. We will have shows coming up for you because the World Cup is coming up. So we will take a week off and then we'll be back in the saddle. But I love this league for good and bad. I care about the sport in this region. It's been a special year. We've seen Canada qualify on the men's side for the World Cup for the first time in 36 years because of some great players that have come out of MLS. We've seen Charlotte break attendance records, Cincinnati break being bad records, Austin, Montreal, special years that we've been able to cover, LAFC Supporter Shield, Philadelphia Union's first ever cup ride to MLS Cup, and of course, the first CCL victory for an MLS team all time in Seattle. We've been there with you for all of it. Thank you so much for being there with us. I really appreciate the support, all the kind words, all the people who have come in, all the tweets, all the people who tell me I hate their team. I love you for it, and thank you for interacting with us. So for that, I appreciate you. We will not be on live tomorrow. And so for the final time this year, thank you so much to all of you for listening.